The first thing Tonia Reyes heard when she walked into room 412 was silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that hospitals sometimes had in the early mornings when the hallways smelled like floor cleaner and instant coffee and the night shift nurses were finishing their last rounds with quiet shoes. This was a different silence. The kind that pressed against the walls. The kind that made the air thicker somehow, harder to breathe, like the room itself had been warned to behave. She stood in the doorway for exactly 3 seconds before she turned back around and looked at Dr. Kwan, who was standing behind her in the hallway holding a tablet and wearing the specific expression of a man who had already accepted his fate. "You're telling me," Tonia said, keeping her voice low, "that this man has been in this room for 11 days and nobody has figured out what's wrong with him?" "Not nobody," Dr. Kwan said carefully. "Dr. Park has been." "Dr. Park," Tonia interrupted, still looking at the door, "told me this morning that the patient has shown no neurological improvement and is unresponsive to stimuli and may have sustained damage that cannot be reversed." She finally turned to look at him. Those were his exact words. "Cannot be reversed." He said them like he was reporting weather. Dr. Kwan adjusted his glasses. "Dr. Park is very thorough. Dr. Park is preparing a man for a coffin that he is not yet inside of." Tonia looked back at the door. "What do we actually know?" Dr. Kwan pulled up the tablet. The information on it was thick, pages of it, dense with the kind of clinical language that hospitals used when they wanted to say we don't know without ever actually saying it. 41 years old. Korean national. Admitted following and here the notes became deliberately vague in the way that only happened when the hospital's legal department had been involved. Incident resulting in blunt force trauma to the head, spinal bruising at C4 and C5, and extensive muscular damage across the right side of his body. He had arrived accompanied by 4 men who did not speak to anyone and signed forms with names that Dr. Kwan suspected were not real. The patient himself had not spoken since admission. He moved his eyes. He tracked movement. His grip reflex was present. But he had not spoken, had not responded to his name, had not indicated through any observable behavior that he was aware of what was happening around him. His name, according to the forms, was Cha Juno. The 4 men who visited him every day believed he was getting worse. Dr. Park believed he might be paralyzed. "What does his personal physician say?" Tonia asked. "Dr. Yu says the same, that the prognosis is uncertain, that they are waiting." "Waiting," Tonia repeated. The word sat in her mouth like a bad taste. "They brought this man to a hospital and the plan is waiting." "Dr. Reyes?" Dr. Kwan said. And there was something in his voice now, something careful and deliberate that made her look at him directly. "The men who brought him here, they are not. This is not an ordinary patient." Tonia looked at him for a long moment. "Dr. Kwan," she said eventually, "I have treated a man in Atlanta who had been shot 6 times and was trying to eat jello with a fork before I even finished stitching him up. I have treated a woman in the Bronx who bit a nurse during a fever and then apologized so sincerely that the nurse cried. I have treated patients who lied to me, patients who screamed at me, patients who told me God sent me, and patients who told me I was personally responsible for all their problems." She tucked her stethoscope into her coat pocket. "Ordinary is not something I require. Alive is what I work with." She pushed the door open and walked into room 412. The room had been modified. That was the first thing she clocked. She'd seen modified hospital rooms before, private patients with money, celebrities occasionally who came through with their whole team, but this was different. The furniture was the same standard hospital furniture, but there were 2 chairs positioned near the window that did not belong to the hospital, low and dark, the kind that suggested someone had carried them up from somewhere. There was a small wooden table with a thermos on it. The blinds were half closed in a way that felt intentional, like whoever had adjusted them had thought about it. And in the bed, Cha Juno. Tonia had read his chart 3 times before walking in. She believed in reading charts. She also believed that charts were not people and that people were almost never what their charts suggested, and so she had trained herself over years to read the chart and then set it aside in her mind and actually look. She looked. He was not small. Even in a hospital bed, which had a way of making everyone look diminished, he was not small. Long limbs, broad shoulders, the kind of build that suggested he had not spent his life behind a desk. His face was still, the way faces got still when people were either sleeping or working very hard not to react to anything. Dark hair pushed back from his forehead. Slightly longer than most Korean men she treated wore theirs. There was a fading bruise along his jaw and a healing cut above his left eyebrow that had been sutured neatly. His eyes were open. He was looking at the ceiling. "Good morning," Tonia said, moving to the side of the bed and picking up his chart from the hook. "My name is Dr. Reyes. I'm going to be checking in on you starting today." She flipped through the chart with one hand, the way she'd done 10,000 times, her eyes moving through the numbers. "I see Dr. Yu has been handling your care. I'm not replacing him, just adding myself to the picture. More eyes, better outcomes, that kind of thing." He did not respond. His eyes did not move from the ceiling. Tonia pulled the penlight from her coat pocket and leaned in to check his pupillary response. Both pupils contracted normally. She noted it. She checked his grip reflex. He had one, his fingers curling faintly around hers before releasing. She noted that too. "Okay," she said, straightening up. "Here's what I want you to know. I'm not going to talk to you like you're not in there. Some doctors do that. They talk around patients like the patient can't hear them, or they use a voice like they're reading a bedtime story to a very tired child." She pulled the blood pressure cuff from the wall mount. "I don't do that. I'm going to talk to you like you're a person because you are a person, and if that annoys you, you're welcome to tell me to leave." His eyes moved. It was subtle, barely a shift, but his eyes moved from the ceiling to her face, and they stayed there, and Tonia, who had been watching for exactly that, felt the small internal click that she always felt when she found the thing she was looking for. "There you are." She wrapped the cuff around his arm and pressed the button and watched the reading climb and settle. Normal range. She noted it. "Your pressure's good," she said. "That's something." She unhooked the cuff and moved around to check the 4-line. "I'm also going to tell you that I'm new to this hospital. I've been here 8 months. I came from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, which is in America, which you probably know since your chart suggests you're very well traveled." She was moving as she talked, checking things, her hands busy, her voice easy. "I did my residency in Atlanta, and before that I grew up between New York and the Dominican Republic, which means I can be annoying in 2 languages and 3 accents, so that's something to look forward to." She heard it then, the faintest thing. Not a laugh, not even close to a laugh, but something that might have been the very distant ancestor of a laugh. A small involuntary exhale through the nose, barely audible, almost nothing. She did not react to it. She had learned a long time ago that reacting to small victories too visibly scared them away. "I'm going to come back this afternoon," she said, pulling his blanket straight at the foot of the bed with the brisk, practiced efficiency of someone who had done it for years. "I want to try something with your right arm. Nothing that will hurt. Just some movement exercises that Dr. Park apparently decided weren't worth attempting yet." "Which," she paused, picked up the chart, made a note, set it back. "I have opinions about that, but I'll keep them professional." She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "Also," she said, not turning around, "whoever arranged those chairs needs to know that they're blocking the optimal airflow path in this room, and it's going to affect your sleep quality. I'm going to move them slightly to the left. If your people have strong feelings about chair placement, they're welcome to find me, and we can have a conversation about interior design versus medical care." She left. In the hallway, Dr. Kwan was waiting. "Well," he said. "He's in there," Tonia said, already walking. "All the way in there. He just needs someone to give him a reason to come out." She pulled out her phone and started typing notes. "Clear my afternoon. I'm changing his care plan." What followed over the next 2 weeks was, depending on who you asked, either a masterclass in unconventional patient care or the most chaotic thing that had ever happened on the 4th floor of Seoul Central Hospital's private wing. Tonia came every morning at 7:15 and every afternoon at 3. She talked, not at him, to him in the way she'd meant, like he was a person who could hear and think and feel. She updated him on things. Hospital gossip, the weather, her opinions on the vending machine selection on the 2nd floor, which she found deeply offensive. She brought small things, not gifts exactly, she was careful about the line, but sometimes a better brand of tea than what the hospital stocked. Because she'd looked at his records and noticed someone had brought him tea twice and he hadn't turned it away. She adjusted his room by degrees, better light in the morning. The chair arrangement changed so there was a sight line to the window. She also started the physical therapy. This was where the real conflict began. Dr. Yu, his personal physician, a quiet man in his 50s with an impeccable suit and a very controlled face, came to observe on the third day and did not say anything while she worked through the exercises with Juno's right arm and shoulder. But the next morning he had left a note on the chart that read, in precise English, "These exercises are premature. The patient requires rest above stimulation." Tonia had read the note twice. Then she had written underneath it, in her own handwriting, "With respect, Dr. Yu, a body in sustained rest without stimulation atrophies. I have seen the scans. The spinal bruising is resolving. The window for recovery is now, not later. I'm proceeding." Dr. Yu had not responded to the note, but he had come back the next afternoon to observe again, and the afternoon after that. And by the end of the second week, Tonia noticed that he was paying very close attention to the way she moved Juno's arm, the angle she used, the resistance she applied, and she had the distinct impression that he was learning. Good, she thought. That's what we're here for. Juno himself. And this was the thing that nobody else on the floor seemed to have noticed, because nobody else had been paying attention the right way, was not unresponsive. He was controlled. There was a difference. Unresponsive patients had a particular quality to them, a specific absence that Tonia had learned to recognize. Juno didn't have that absence. What he had was choice. He was choosing not to respond, and the reasons for that choice she couldn't fully know, but she knew it was a choice and choices could be changed. She was working on it. On the 14th day of her involvement in his care, she came in for her afternoon check and found him with his eyes closed. She had timed her visits variably on purpose. She didn't want him to clock her schedule perfectly, because predictability was comfortable in the wrong way, and she wanted him slightly off balance, slightly curious. She moved through her check with her usual running commentary. His pressure was up 2 points from the morning but still well within range. His right arm had more passive range of motion than the day before. The bruising on his jaw was almost entirely faded. And then she found a good song on her phone, turned the volume down to something that was barely above ambient, and set it on the windowsill. Then she began to chart. She stood at the foot of his bed, tablet in hand, and she charted. And while she charted, because the song was good and she was 29 years old and had been working since 6 in the morning and sometimes your body just wanted to move, she shifted her weight. Just a little. A small, contained, perfectly ridiculous little sway that was somewhere between professional dignity and complete abandonment of it. And then the chorus hit, and the sway became something more. Not a full dance. Just the suggestion of one. Her shoulders getting involved, her head tilting, her feet doing a small shuffle against the tile floor that she was telling herself wasn't happening. She thought he was sleeping. She was wrong. The laugh started small. It was barely a sound. Just a rupture in the silence. A crack in the stillness that had lived in room 412 for 11 days before she arrived and had been getting smaller but was still there. And then it grew. It wasn't a polished sound. It wasn't the measured, controlled kind of laugh that a man in his position probably deployed at calculated moments. It was involuntary and helpless and real, and it came from somewhere he hadn't accessed in a very long time, and Tonia spun around with her tablet. Clutched to her chest and found Cha Juno, the man who had not spoken, had not laughed, had barely moved in 11 days, laughing at her. Tonia stared. He laughed harder. "Okay," she said after a moment. "First of all," she pointed at him, "you were awake." He was still laughing. His whole face had changed. Something had opened in it, some locked room swinging wide, and his eyes were bright and crinkled at the corners, and he looked, for the first time since she'd met him, like a person who knew exactly where he was and thought something about it was funny. "You were awake and you watched me do that," Tonia continued, hearing her own voice go slightly indignant. "And you let me just—" She stopped. "That was very rude." He pressed his lips together like he was trying to control himself. Failed completely. "I'm a doctor," she said with great dignity. "I am a medical professional." "I know," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, low and slightly ragged. But it was there, full and present, and his. Tonia kept her face very professional for exactly 1 more second. Then she sat down in the chair next to his bed, put her face in her hands, and laughed too. The 4th floor of Seoul Central's private wing had a particular way of operating that Tonia had observed carefully over her 8 months there. It was not the most prestigious floor in the hospital. That distinction belonged to the 6th, where the hospital president sometimes toured with donor groups and everything gleamed like it was being photographed. But the 4th floor had a specific energy that she'd come to appreciate. The nurses there were competent and unsentimental. The attending physicians communicated efficiently and without the particular brand of competitive posturing that she'd experienced in larger American hospitals. And the floor supervisor, head nurse Park Mayan, was the most efficient human being Tonya had ever met, and also occasionally terrifying in the way that people became terrifying when they had seen everything and were surprised by nothing. It was Nurse Park who found her in the hallway outside room 412 the morning after Juno left, holding a tablet and looking at it in the way people looked at things when they weren't actually looking at them but were instead thinking very hard. "Dr. Reyes," Nurse Park said, with her characteristic efficiency of greeting. "The patient in 412 has spoken." "I know," Tonya said. "I was there." Nurse Park studied her for a moment. The night nursing staff reported that he requested water at 2 in the morning. Verbally. He asked by name. He knew the nurse's name. Nurse Cho has been doing his night rounds since admission. Tonya felt the click again. That small, warm internal click. "He's been listening the whole time," she said. "He knows everyone's name. He's been paying attention." "It would appear so." Nurse Park paused. "Dr. Yu has been notified. He's coming in at 10. "Good." Tonya finally looked up from the tablet. "Can you make sure room service knows to bring his breakfast with the good tea? The green tea, the Ocelot, not the bagged stuff from the third floor stock." Nurse Park gave her a look that was not quite an expression. "He's a VIP patient. His meals are all ready." "The bagged tea is a crime against sick people," Tonya said, already walking. "I've mentioned it before." "Good morning, Nurse Park." She pushed open the door to 412. Juno was awake. He was sitting up, not fully upright, still at an angle with pillows supporting him, but the shift from lying flat to propped up was significant and she clocked it immediately. He looked at her when she came in. His face was still controlled in the way that she suspected was simply his face, the way some people had a resting expression that read as serious regardless of what they were actually feeling, but there was something different in his eyes. Alertness. Recognition. "Good morning," Tonya said, moving to the chart. "How's the right side feeling?" "Stiff," he said. His voice was less rough than the day before. One night of using it had helped already. "That's going to happen. We're going to fix the stiff." She was already pulling the blood pressure cuff from the wall. "Can you tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 where the stiffness is? 1 being you barely notice it. 10 being you would like me to remove the entire arm." Something moved across his face. 6. 6 is workable. 6 means we have something to work with. She wrapped the cuff around his arm. "Yesterday's BP was good. Let's see if we're consistent." She pressed the button. "Did you sleep?" "Some. Some is better than none. The request for water at 2 a.m. means you were awake, which means we should talk about sleep quality. I'm going to adjust your evening protocol." She was noting things as she talked, her pen moving. "The current evening medication schedule is designed for someone whose primary issue is pain management. I think your primary issue is actually something closer to hypervigilance, which is a different problem, and I want to address it differently." He was quiet for a moment. The cuff finished. "It's reading." She noted the number. "You talk a lot," he said. "I do," Tonya agreed pleasantly. "It's a documented feature. My attending in residency called it a deficit. I call it a therapeutic tool. The jury is still deliberating." She set down the tablet and moved to the foot of the bed. "I'm going to do a full range of motion check this morning. I want to see what changed overnight." "What changed is that I feel like I was hit by a vehicle," he said. "You were," she said simply, and then watched his face to see what he did with that. He blinked. Then something shifted, a small, private acknowledgement. "You read my chart carefully," he said. "I read everyone's chart carefully. I read your chart 3 times. She took hold of his right foot through the blanket, her hands professionally positioned. "I also read between the lines of your chart, which your hospital team has been writing in a way designed to not say certain things out loud. I don't need those things said out loud. I need to know what the body is doing." She began the range of motion check. "Can you feel this?" "Yes." "Good." "Resistance against my hand. Push back." "Just a little." He did. The resistance was weak but present, and she noted it. "Better than yesterday," she said. "You're comparing to yesterday?" "I'm comparing to every day. That's how we know if we're moving forward." She moved to his knee. "You have a baseline now. You can either improve against it or not, and my job is to make sure you improve." She looked up at him. That's the whole job. Everything else is secondary. There was a longer pause. She was used to silence from him, had been for 2 weeks, but this silence was different. It had texture. He was deciding something. Dr. Yu thinks I may not walk normally again, he said. Tonia moved to his hip, checking the joint mobility with careful, practiced hands. She didn't answer immediately. She believed in answering medical questions with precision, not speed. Dr. Yu, she said finally, is a careful doctor who does not want to create expectations he can't meet. That's ethical medicine. I respect it. She straightened up. My read, based on what I've seen in 2 weeks, is different. But I want 2 more weeks of data before I make you a promise I intend to keep. He looked at her, the controlled face, the careful eyes. 2 more weeks, he said. Minimum. She picked up the tablet. Now I want to try something. I want you to try sitting up fully, no pillow support, for 5 minutes. I'll be right here. If anything hurts beyond what's manageable, you tell me and we stop. And if I refuse? Tonia looked up from the tablet. Then I sit in that chair for 5 minutes and tell you about the vending machine situation on the 2nd floor, which is genuinely one of the worst things I've encountered in this country. And I will not stop until the 5 minutes are up. She tilted her head. Your choice. He sat up. Dr. Yu arrived at 10 with his impeccable suit and his controlled face. Antonia met him in the hallway with her tablet and the full updated chart. She had a healthy respect for Dr. Yu. He was not a bad doctor. He was technically proficient. He cared about his patient in the way that was visible if you looked carefully, and he had not tried to undermine her directly. What he had done was operate from a framework she disagreed with, a framework that prioritized caution above stimulation, waiting above action, preservation of dignity above the messy, noisy work of pushing someone back toward themselves. He spoke last night, Dr. Yu said, reading through the updates she'd provided. He spoke yesterday afternoon as well. Full sentences. Appropriate cognition. Tonia held the tablet steady. There's no indication of cognitive damage, Dr. Yu. There never was. The silence was behavioral, not neurological. Dr. Yu looked up at her. He chose not to engage, she continued, for reasons I imagine had nothing to do with medicine. But the body and the mind are not separate. The choice to disengage from the environment affected his physical recovery. When I gave him something worth engaging with, both improved. Something worth engaging with, Dr. Yu repeated with a careful neutrality. I made him laugh, Tonia said plainly. And then I started his physical therapy in earnest and had a real conversation with him for the first time. He's tracking, he's responding, he's showing measurable improvement in the right side and his sleep quality is changing. She lowered the tablet. I'm not dismissing your approach. I'm building on it. I'd like us to be in agreement about the next phase. Dr. Yu was quiet for a long moment. He had the look of a man recalibrating. Not resisting, exactly, but adjusting. She'd seen it before, that specific look of an experienced person encountering something that required them to be flexible. What is the next phase? He said. Standing. Assisted with support. I want to get him upright by end of this week. I also want to significantly reduce the evening sedatives and replace them with a structured sleep protocol. And I want to change his daytime routine to include something that gives his mind actual work to do. He is a very intelligent man with nothing to occupy him, and that is making everything worse. Dr. Yu looked at the chart again. Looked at her. Looked at the chart. I will observe, he said. You're welcome to do more than observe, she said. I don't have territorial feelings about this. I want him better. He held her gaze for a moment, and something passed in his expression that wasn't quite warmth but was adjacent to respect. Proceed, he said. The 4 men who came to visit Juno were not subtle. They were never subtle. They stood outside his room in a way that made the other nurses give the hallway a wider berth, large and still and watchful in the way of people who were very good at their particular profession, whatever that profession was. Tonia had been professionally incurious about it, which was a choice she made with full awareness. She was a doctor. The body in room 412 was her patient. What the body did outside of room 412 was not her department. But on the 3rd week, one of the 4 men, the youngest, who had a sharp face and eyes that tracked everything, stopped her in the hallway. Dr. Reyes, he said. She stopped. Yes. He laughed, the man said. He said it in Korean first and then, When he saw her expression, repeated it in English. Yesterday, I was outside the door. He laughed. Tonia looked at him carefully. She had learned to read rooms in her career. It was a survival skill, not just a medical one, and what she read in this man's face was not a threat. It was something much more complicated than that. It was relief, and something under the relief that might have been fear, the particular fear of people who had been watching someone they were responsible for deteriorate and had not been able to stop it. He laughed, she confirmed. He's going to keep laughing. That's the goal. The man looked at her for a long moment. What do you need? He said. For his recovery. Whatever you need. Tonia thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. A better physical therapy mat than the one this floor has. Memory foam, the kind with lumbar support markings. And whatever tea he actually likes, whatever he drinks normally, not hospital stock. Those are the things that will help. The man nodded. Both items were in the room by the following morning. On the day she got Juno to stand for the first time, the room was quiet and specific in the way that moments sometimes were. Dr. Yu was there, positioned near the window with his arms folded and his face very still. Nurse Park was there because Nurse Park was everywhere important on the 4th floor. Antonia was at Juno's side with her hands positioned at his right arm and shoulder, her voice steady and calm. Slow, she said. You're not trying to be fast. You're trying to be upright. Those are different goals. Slow. He stood. It was not graceful. His right leg was not fully reliable yet, and she took weight at his side and he gripped the bed rail with his left hand, and it took longer than it would take when he was well, and there was a moment in the middle of it where she felt him waver and she said quietly, I have you, take the breath. And he did, and then he was standing. He was taller than she'd calculated. He was looking straight ahead, his jaw set, his breathing controlled, and she could see, because she was right beside him and paying attention, that his eyes were doing something. Not crying. He was very far from the kind of man who would cry in front of 4 people. But something. 45 seconds. Nurse Park said quietly from behind them. Tonia didn't move. She kept her hands where they were and let him have the 45 seconds and the one that followed and the one after that. Okay, she said eventually. Let's sit back down. One more, he said. She looked up at him. He was still looking straight ahead. One more minute, he said. She kept her hands where they were. One more minute. Later, in the hallway, Dr. Yu found her at the nurse's station finishing her notes. Dr. Reyes, he said. She looked up. He hesitated, and this was notable because Dr. Yu was not a man who hesitated. He was precise and deliberate, and he said things when he was ready to say them and not before. What you did, he said. The approach. The laughing. He stopped. Started again. I have been treating him for 6 years. I know him as well as someone in my position knows a patient. A pause. He has not laughed. In a very long time. Not because of the injury. Tonia looked at him steadily. You gave him something back, Dr. Yu said. Something that was, it was not a clinical intervention. The clinical and the human are the same intervention, Tonia said. That's the thing I learned early. The body keeps score of everything, the loneliness and the joy and the humor and the fear. You cannot treat the body and ignore everything else it's carrying. She closed the chart. He's carrying a lot. He doesn't need me to pretend I can't see it. He needs me to treat the whole thing. Dr. Yu looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, the kind of nod that meant something. The month passed the way months sometimes did when something real was happening inside them. Unevenly, with some days stretching wide and others collapsing into a handful of hours, the whole thing punctuated by small victories that were not small at all. Juno walked to the window for the first time on a Tuesday. Tonia did not make a production of it. She had learned his precise tolerance for things being made a production of, which was extremely low, and so she documented it in the chart, told him his pace and posture were both good, and then started talking about the quality of Seoul's November sky, which she had opinions about, and let him stand there for 9 minutes looking at it before she guided him back to the chair. He was roasting her by the second week after he started talking. This was not something she had anticipated, and it delighted her completely. It started small, a dry comment here, a look there, the specific raised eyebrow of a man who had catalogued her habits and found them entertaining. She had a specific move she did when she was reading charts, a one-sided face where her mouth pulled toward her nose, and the first time he described it back to her in precise detail, she nearly dropped the tablet. You look, he said, like you are personally offended by the numbers. I am often personally offended by the numbers, she said. The numbers are frequently wrong. The numbers are measurements. They cannot be wrong. They can be incomplete, she said, pointing at him with the tablet. Which is functionally the same thing. It is not the same thing. Juno, my friend. I am your patient. Juno, my patient. And you should not call patients your friend. It is not professional. What I do professionally, Tonia said, sitting in the chair with great dignity, is get people well. What I do culturally is have a personality while I do it. These are not in conflict. He looked at her for a moment. Dr. Park, he said, does not have a personality. Dr. Park has a personality. It just lives somewhere very deep inside him and requires excavation. She crossed her legs. I've been working on him. I made him laugh last week. It was only a small laugh, but it was real, and I'm counting it. You are collecting laughs, he said. I am, she agreed. It's my metric. Standard metrics measure things like blood pressure and range of motion. My metric is laughs. The more the better. He looked at the window. And what is your count for me? Tonia thought about it. 47, she said. Not counting the ones you hide, which I estimate add another 12. His lips pressed together. I do not hide laughs. You do a face, she said, where you look like you're being very serious and very medical information is happening, but your eyes do a thing. I've seen it 19 times. I have an entire separate tally. He turned to look at her fully then, and the controlled face did the thing she described. The eyes bright, the jaw set, the mouth pulled against itself, and she pointed at him immediately. There, she said. That's the face. That's 19 and 1. He laughed. A real one, unhidden, the kind that had been getting easier for him, that still sounded like something shaking loose but now sounded less like damage and more like release. The physical progress was real and measurable and accelerating in the way that bodies sometimes did when they decided they were ready. Tonia had drawn the therapy out over the month in deliberate stages. Standing, walking with support, walking without, stairs in the 3rd week, and had marked every milestone in the chart with the precision she brought to everything and the private satisfaction she shared with no one except, occasionally, Nurse Park, who received these updates with her characteristic efficiency and occasionally said things like, as expected, in a tone that managed to be both professional and warm. Dr. Yu had become, over the course of the month, something she hadn't expected. A collaborator. Not a warm one. His personality ran toward the precise end of the spectrum, and he expressed approval through the absence of correction more than through direct statement, but a genuine one. He began incorporating elements of her approach into his own check-ins, asking Juno questions about how he felt rather than only cataloging what he measured. She saw him, once, bring a better quality of tea than the hospital stock. She did not comment on it. It would have embarrassed them both. On the 26th day of Juno's admission, the hospital director called Tonia into his office. Dr. Cho Hyun-woo was 62 years old and had run Seoul Central for 18 years with the specific authority of a man who understood that hospitals were institutions and institutions had politics and politics required management. He was not unkind. He had been straightforwardly supportive of Tonia since her arrival, which she suspected had something to do with the recommendation letter she'd brought from Johns Hopkins and something to do with the results she'd been producing. But he was formal in the way of men whose entire professional world rewarded formality. He offered her tea. She took it. Dr. Reyes, he said, I've been reviewing the records for the patient in room 412. Yes, she said. The progress over the last 4 weeks is... He looked at the paper in front of him and then set it down in the way of a man deciding to speak plainly rather than formally. Remarkable. Dr. Yu has submitted his own assessment and the language he uses is specific. He credits your approach as the determining factor in the recovery. Tonia absorbed this. Dr. Yu did most of the medical groundwork. The injury stabilized under his care. What I did built on that. That is a generous characterization, Dr. Cho said, and one that Dr. Yu explicitly does not share. He looked at her. I want to discuss your position here. She kept her face attentive and professional and did not let anything else show, because she was 29 years old and had been in enough rooms with men who held something she wanted to remain exactly that. Attentive and professional, because rushing anything would only slow it down. Your contract is for a 1-year consultancy with the option of extension, Dr. Cho said. We are in month 8. I would like to discuss not an extension but a permanent appointment. Head of Integrative Care. A position that does not currently exist at this hospital, and that I would like to create with you as its inaugural head. He paused. It would involve restructuring the patient care model for our long-term and complex recovery cases. It would involve a team that reports to you. It would involve, he looked at the paper, compensation and benefits that I think you will find competitive. The room was quiet for a moment. Tonia put her teacup down on the saucer with the precise care of someone who was thinking very quickly behind a very calm face. I would need to know more about the scope, she said. What restructuring means operationally. What authority the role actually carries versus what it carries on paper. And I would need input into how the team is built, because the team determines the outcomes and I have standards. Dr. Cho looked at her for a moment. Then he did something she hadn't seen him do before. He smiled. Not the formal, institutional smile that hospital directors deployed for donors and reviews. A real one. I expected that answer, he said. I have a proposal document. I'd like you to take it, read it, and tell me what you would change. He slid a folder across the desk. Tonia picked it up. I'll have notes for you by Thursday, she said. I expected that too, he said. Juno's discharge was on a Thursday. The morning of, Tonia did her final check with the brisk professional efficiency she brought to everything, but there was something different in the room and she suspected. They both knew it. He was dressed in real clothes for the first time in a month. His clothes were dark and well made. He was standing near the window when she came in. He could do that now. He could stand without assistance and look at the November city with confidence. She reviewed the final chart. His numbers were very good. Better than she had expected. The right side of his body had improved beyond her early projections. His walking was not fully back to normal, but it was functional and still improving. It would continue to improve with the outpatient physical therapy program she had designed. She closed the chart. You are leaving, she said. Yes, he replied. He turned from the window and looked at her. His expression was controlled, but there was something new in the way he paid attention to her. He listened to her differently than he listened to others. I have your discharge instructions, she said. She took the papers from her coat pocket. This is a copy for you and one for Dr. Yu. The therapy plan is on pages 3 and 4. I added detailed notes because I do not trust general advice. Dr. Yu may not agree with all of them. Dr. Yu respects you, Juno said. Dr. Yu tolerates me, she replied. That is different, but it is enough. I do not need everyone to agree with me. I need the patient to improve. He looked at the papers, then back at her. You are unusual for a doctor, he said. I get results, she replied. That is what matters. He stayed quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. I did not expect to walk out of this room, he said. Tonia looked at him directly. I know, she said. I did. The corner of his mouth moved. The controlled face and the eyes doing the thing she tallied. And she made a mental note. 48 unhidden, and kept her face professionally neutral. Dr. Reyes, he said. The dancing. He paused. The song. What was it? She looked at him for a moment. Seriously. The almost smile. I want to know what song made you do that in a patient's room. I was not doing anything, she said with great dignity. I was experiencing a brief moment of professional musicality. You were doing a thing, he said. With your shoulders. My shoulders are my own business. And your feet. Juno. There was a shuffle, he said. Specific. Repeated. This conversation is over, she said and moved toward the door and heard behind her the laugh. Not the small one, not the contained one, but the full one. The one that had taken 3 weeks to reach and then had kept coming back, easier every time. The laugh that had started everything. She stopped in the doorway. Kept her back to him for a moment so he wouldn't see her face. Get better, she said. Or I'll find out and I'll be extremely pointed about it in the chart. I believe you, he said. She walked out. 3 months later, Tonia Reyes was in the middle of her second week running Seoul Central's newly created Department of Integrative Patient Care when she got a message from Dr. Yu. It was brief, he was a brief communicator, and it said he walked 4 kilometers yesterday. Unassisted. He asked me to inform you. She read it at her desk, surrounded by the particular organized chaos of a new department in its first month. Protocols being drafted, a team of 6 being assembled and trained, pushback from 3 attending physicians who had opinions about her approach and were learning, one by one, that she had better ones. She had her own office now, which she had furnished with a specific and intentional disregard for the standard hospital administrator aesthetic, because she spent 50 hours a week in it and her environment mattered. She put her phone face up on the desk and looked at the message for a moment. For kilometers, 3 months out of the room where he had expected to stay. She typed back, "Tell him if he's walking 4 kilometers, he has no excuse not to do the full PT protocol." Pages 3 and 4. I annotated them for a reason. Dr. Yu's response came in 40 seconds, which was fast for him. He said, and I am quoting precisely, "Tell Dr. Reyes she is the most annoying doctor I have ever encountered." Tonia smiled. She typed, "I'll add that to my credentials." She set the phone down and picked up the proposal she'd been annotating. A framework for integrating behavioral and psychological assessment into the standard intake process for complex recovery cases. Something that did not exist at this hospital yet. Something that would. The notes she was making were extensive and specific and occasionally pointed. Dr. Cho had stopped flinching at the pointed notes. He was learning. Through the glass wall of her office she could see the hallway, the department she was building into something real, and beyond it the hospital that had hired her on a 1-year contract and was keeping her on purpose. She had not come to Seoul to build something permanent. She had come because the opportunity was good and the challenge was real, and she had never, in her life, backed away from either of those things. But permanence, she was learning, sometimes built itself from the things you did fully and without reservation, from being present in room 412 at 7:15 every morning, from talking to a man who had decided silence was safer, from dancing without knowing you were being watched, from finding the laugh under everything. Her phone buzzed again. Dr. Yu, he also said, and I am still quoting, that the song was not as bad as he implied. She actually laughed then, alone in her office with her annotated proposals and her new department and her 48 tallied laughs. 49 now, her own counting. She typed back, "It's a great song. I have always maintained this." She put the phone away and went back to work.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that show up fully even when no one else is watching and nothing is working. The right approach, the right presence, the right person in the right room at the right time, that is not luck. That is what happens when you refuse to do your job halfway. Healing is not just a skill, it's the decision you make every single day to see people when everyone else has stopped looking. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.